Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new meta prediction video here for the second channel. I've done one for Arlington and Toronto. It is now time to do another one here for San Diego. San Diego is this weekend, and I thought I would do a meta prediction, once again talking about what I think could happen in the format and what will do well. Let's start things off with the elephant in the room. Obviously, Lugia is the best deck going in to San Diego. Now, there are a couple ways people are playing Lugia right now. Some builds are kind of utilizing Connor's build with the amazing rare Raikou, and then some are just not like Connor's build here, not playing Manaphy or Dunsparce. Now, I do think that Dunsparce is going to be crucial going into San Diego. I think that after Connor won with the Raikou, and honestly, Lightning saw quite a bit of resurgence. I mean, Regis did really well. Regis did well because Lugia players were cutting the Manaphy Dunsparce, or just cutting the Dunsparce in general, meaning that Lugia just got bodied by Lightning all weekend, and that is why I think that Dunsparce is going to be going right back into Lugia decks in San Diego. Now, Connor's list might not be the optimal play for San Diego because his build was more optimized, I would say, for Arlington, being able to kind of weave and dodge and just kind of abuse that Raikou. Was really helpful, but I really think that going into San Diego, we're going to start seeing Manaphy Dunsparce go right back into Lugia, which is going to hurt the chances of this doing well, but certainly won't be a bad deck regardless. Obviously, there's also the Lugia Path builds, like the one John Ang used to get top 4 in Arlington. The Path build Lugia is definitely interesting. I think could be experimented and explored a little bit further going into San Diego. Path is actually in a really good spot right now in the meta and might actually be really good for San Diego, so we might end up seeing some big Path decks do well. But I'm definitely interested to see where Lugia goes. There might even be a brand new Lugia deck never before seen. I know Gengar Lugia apparently won an online tournament, which is a big deal, so who knows? Lugia might start adapting to the format, and we might start seeing some more crazy Lugia decks pop up this weekend, and I'm excited to see that happen, because Lugia definitely keeps evolving every single tournament, and who knows, it might evolve even further in San Diego. But that, of course, means Lost Box is still in a prime position to do well. There is, of course, the Lost Box Ray deck and then Lost Box Kyogre. Lost Box Kyogre I still think is really good, and I think that the Ray build is also good. The biggest issue with Rayquaza is that it is very weak to Marnies and Judge and Roxanne. Just hand disruption can be very annoying for this deck. I think that amazing rare Rayquaza is still actually a pretty optimal build. A lot of the big decks that rely on like big Pokemon or just VMAXs just kind of get destroyed by Rayquaza. I think this Rayquaza build Lost Box is still pretty good and maybe still the best way to play Lost Box going into San Diego, but I think it does need to adapt to the format. Maybe even start playing Drapion to help against a Mew matchup a little bit. This is the build here that got top 8 in Arlington, so there's definitely experimentations to be done, and definitely different routes and avenues you can take when building Lost Box. So I do think the Rayquaza build is pretty good. There's even been stuff like Zygarde that is seen playing the Rayquaza. Obviously, you can cut the Raikou V, and you can play Zeraora, you can play Zekrom, you could play amazing rare Raikou too, if you want to have that as an option. Raikou's still okay. I mean, it's still force your opponent to play like Manaphy down, and sometimes they don't find it. You can take advantage of that pretty easily. So I think Lost Box is still in a great position in the format. And I think it's still probably the second best deck. I'm guaranteeing you we're going to see a Lost Box in top 8. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I'll say we're going to see a Lost Box in top 4 in San Diego. That's my first prediction. Next up is Mew. Mew is still in a great spot right now, thanks to Path of the Peak being pretty good in the format. I think that Path Mew is optimal. I've seen Path Mew with Meloetta do well recently, and also just the double turbo build of Mew. Either way, I think you want to play Path Mew. If you're going to play Mew going into San Diego, you got to play with Path and Vacuum. I think it's the optimal way to go because it's just really good in the format. And Hand Disruption is also insane right now against Lugia and against Lost Zone decks. Judge can be very annoying to deal with because obviously Oranguru doesn't work when you judge them, and that is the big deal with the Judge build of Mew. So yeah, Mew with Path is, in my opinion, kind of optimal going into San Diego, so we'll have to see how that performs. Next up is Regis. Now, Regis is in a bit of a weird spot right now. It's actually doing pretty well in the online tournament scene. Obviously, it won over in Kyoto, and it got top 8 in Arlington. I think the big thing with Regis is that Regis is kind of an on and off type of deck. Like, it does well in waves where it's like going into Arlington, obviously people weren't playing the Dunsparce in their decks, and that made it so that Regigigas just kind of farmed the Lugia, so you could just go like Choice Bell one-shot Regigigas, and I think that's kind of the big factor you have to keep in mind with Regis. So Regis is still great in my opinion. Honestly, it's one of my top picks for San Diego. If I was going to San Diego, I would have probably considered Reggie in my top 3 decks to play. It's a fun deck to play. I enjoy piloting it a lot. And Regis has been doing well. It's actually been winning online tourneys recently. And even with the Manaphy Dunsparce, Regis is still a force to be reckoned with. Not only Can it beat Lugia? It also just has good matchups across the board. Like, a lot of decks in the format do lose to Regis, and I think that's a big deal in the meta. I think Reggie still has to adapt. I think the Serenas are very important right now in the format over playing heavier Marnies. I know Marnie Path is something Reggie can abuse, but I do like the idea of Serena, maybe even Boss's Order in the deck to help take down Dunsparce or Manaphy or whatever, and just having extra gusting cards never hurts right now in the meta. Empoleon and Weezing are still pretty popular, or not popular, but crawling back into decks right now, and that is something you do have to watch out for if you're playing Reggie, especially if you're optimizing Pokestop over Path or whatever in your Reggie list, which I think you always have to play Path and Reggies no matter what. It's one of the things that makes Reggie so good. It's one of the only Path decks right now, so definitely keep that in mind. But yeah, Reggies is still good. I don't think Reggie's going to make top 8, unfortunately. I think Reggie's just kind of folds pretty badly to Dunsparce, but I think it's going to go into the decks right now. I know it's doing well right now in the online scene, and people are really hyping up Reggie's, but I personally don't think Reggie's is going to make top 8. It's not a bad call for San Diego anyways, because there's a lot of other decks that aren't Lugia with Dunsparce Manaphy still lose to Reggie's pretty easily, so you might see a Reggie in top 8. I don't think we will. I do think there's going to be a couple Reggies in top 16, however. Next up, we got Dura. Dura is in a weird spot right now. It's a good deck, but just, again, Lugia with Vacuum just kind of bodies you. However, I think Dura is still a solid pick for San Diego, and I'm going to say we're going to see an Dura deck in top 16. I think it's still like an okay deck right now in the format. It doesn't really do anything wrong. It's pretty solid. It still has decent matchups across the board, and it can farm a lot of the decks that kind of try to counter Lugia too, which is a big deal. And it can even beat Lugia sometimes also with those big Paracells coming in clutch. So definitely expect to see some Dura. Is it the best deck to play? Probably not. Again, it still loses to Lugia when they hit the Vacuum at the right time and they destroy you with Yveltal, but I think Dura is still a pretty solid deck regardless, and I think we're going to see at least one Dura deck in top 16. I don't think it's going to make top 8, but top 16 for sure. It's still like a reliable deck that a lot of people just like to play because it's just, again, it's reliable. Next up, we have Palkia variants. I wanted to note Palkia here. Palkia is kind of on its comeback right now in the format, and this was the highest placing Palkia deck in Arlington. This build did use the Articuno, which Articuno we'll talk about later, and then Empoleon was also being used in Palkia to help against Lost Box. Double Empoleon can be annoying for Lost Box, because if you put 2 Empoleons in play, the opponent can't use Escape Rope with Lost Zone to try to counter your Empoleon, which is pretty hilarious. And of course, Palkia still has decent matchups across the board. It's still Palkia at the end of the day. With stuff like Mew in the format, it can still beat Mew. Obviously, it can beat Lost Box. It can beat a lot of different decks. It even has an okay matchup against Lugia. The big thing with Lugia is not really respecting the paralysis as much anymore. Obviously, Lugia will still play Eldegoss Birdkeeper. I think Birdkeeper is a staple in Lugia right now. But one Birdkeeper, a lot of the time, isn't going to save you against Articuno, especially 2 Articunos. And I think that Articuno is going to make a bit of a comeback, or at least Paralysis will make a bit of a comeback in San Diego. We might even start seeing that Zekrom being used again to help counter Lugia. But I definitely think Paralysis is maybe on the comeback, and that is where Articuno might do well. We might even just see Palkia with Articuno do well. Not going to say Palkia is going to make top 8. I don't think it will make top 8, but I still think Palkia is a pretty decent pick. Next up, we have Eternatus. Now, this is a deck that I am rooting for right now. Eternatus VMAX is looking pretty decent in the meta right now. The big thing is that Galarian Weezing is so good. It's basically a Galarian Weezing deck with, like, Eternatus backup. But this deck is still kind of insane, and I think that the right Eternatus VMAX deck can honestly do really well. Will it win? Probably not. It would be really cool to see Etern win a regional, though, just before it rotates. But I am saying that Etern is a solid deck in the format, and I think that, honestly, Etern has a decent chance of making top 8. At the very least, Etern might make top 8. I'm going to say it right now. I think Weezing is really good. I think that Eternus is not a bad deck. It actually has pretty good matchups, in my opinion, and we might see Etern make top 8. I would love to see Etern make top 8. I wish it would win a regional. That'd be really sick. But yeah, no, Etern has really come back in the meta in a big way, and I think that it's still a pretty solid deck right now in the format, and I think that definitely has a chance of potentially not taking down a regional, I wish it would, but at least getting into top 8. So you might see an Etern deck in top 8. I'm going to make a gamble right now, and we might see an Etern deck in top 8. I'm just going to say it. I'm hopeful. I'm riding on some pretty heavy copium here. Look, okay, I'm riding on that heavy copium. Next up, we got the Aerodactyl Vikavolt deck, the Alex Kreckler deck. Now, this is a very fascinating deck. The idea, obviously, is you item lock with Vikavolt. You have Aerodactyl to try to give you a good Lugia matchup. You have the Raikou. It's basically like it's an anti-meta deck, right? Vikavolt counters a lot of decks pretty hard, especially Lost Box, and it can even beat Reggie's. And then, of course, Aerodactyl is really good against Lugia. But it's kind of a 50-50 versus Lugia, because unless you item lock them going second and they whiff the Archeops Lugia play and then you Aerodactyl them the following turn, the deck is still kind of like I'm not sold on it is what I'm trying to say. I do think the deck is good and definitely can beat Lugia if it goes first and has like an optimal setup. It's not a bad deck by any means. Is it the optimal way to play Aerodactyl even? Maybe not. I know Aerodactyl Wheezing is still kind of out there. I even won at locals on the 30th of December with an Aerodactyl Wheezing Crobat deck, which is something that I would have maybe played to our San Diego, to be honest. But yeah, I think Aerodactyl is still pretty solid right now. I don't know if Vikavolt is the best way to play it, but definitely seems good. It's a very high roll deck, very, very high roll deck. And you gotta have some coin flip luck on your side, I think, to really have a good matchup against Lugia. But you can still beat Lugia with Vikavolt buying you a turn, and then they can't get the Archeops, and then you just Aerodactyl them into oblivion. We'll have to see where this deck goes. I don't think we're going to see this Vikavolt Aerodactyl deck make top 8 again. I think people will play it, but I don't think it's going to make top 8. I don't even know if it's going to make top 16, to be honest. I don't know if it was a one-time thing for Arlington, but we'll have to see how the deck performs. Next up, I wanted to talk about just the Articuno Inteleon deck. The pure Articuno deck seems okay. I mean, yeah, Articuno's still decent right now. I think Lugia is really starting to, like, not respect paralysis as much as they were. Again, Birdkeeper still seen playing the deck, but there's some variants and some ways you can kind of toy around with the Articuno toolbox deck as you see fit going into San Diego. So I have to see where the Articuno deck goes. I think Articuno Palkia might be the better way to play Articuno in all honesty, but we'll definitely have to see how Articuno plays. Like the water box in Articuno deck over Palkia might do better in the Palkia build. Who knows? But I think Articuno might make a bit of a comeback in San Diego. Because again, I don't think Lugia is playing the anti-paralysis cards, apart from just a Birdkeeper, which isn't sometimes enough to stop Articuno. Next up, we have Goodra. I wanted to mention Goodra real quick. There's been a lot of hype for Goodra on the online scene right now. I don't know how good Goodra really is right now in the format, but it's been getting a bit of hype, and I wanted to mention it regardless. Goodra is in an interesting spot right now. The Goodra Lost Zone deck is kind of I don't know if it's a meme, but again, it's been getting attention online, and who knows, somebody might play it. I don't think it's going to do, like, insane. I don't think we're going to see, like, our Lost Goodra win a regionals or make top 8, but I would guarantee you, we might honestly see a Goodra deck squeak in a top 32 in San Diego. It's been on the attention and kind of the hype train right now, so I'd be interested to see how it performs in San Diego. But I just wanted to quickly mention Goodra real quick. And then we, of course, got to mention Control. Control's in a weird spot right now. Obviously, it took down Toronto, didn't do that good in Arlington, but could make a comeback in San Diego. Again, Control is kind of in a spot where it's like Lugia doesn't really respect the Yveltal anymore, and obviously there's the power of Mewtwo being really good in the format, and I don't know, man, Mewtwo can farm a lot of decks. Now, the big thing is Mewtwo could obviously lose to something like Amazing Rare Yveltal, which is one of the reasons why the Amazing Rare Yveltal deck, or the Amazing Rare Rayquaza, not Yveltal, I meant Rayquaza. There's too many freaking Amazing Rares. Yeah, Amazing Rare Rayquaza. The reason why Amazing Rare Rayquaza is kind of hyped right now is mainly because it does have that decent matchup to, like, even Mewtwo or something. Like, any big wall Pokemon that tries to come into play, like, you can just blow up with Amazing Rare Rayquaza. But I do think Mewtwo V Union is in a pretty okay spot right now. I think it could be primed to make a bit of a comeback. I think the big thing is that Yveltal isn't really being respected right now in Lugia, and I think that's a very big deal going into San Diego Regional. So I'm curious to see if we'll see a Mewtwo comeback in San Diego. Will it win the tournament? It might. We'll have to see how the meta looks. But I think we might see a Mewtwo deck potentially make top 8 in San Diego, because I think it's on prime to make a comeback. And even it can adapt to the format and even adapt to what is good right now, which is another big deal with how the Mewtwo deck can kind of play. But I would expect to maybe see a Mewtwo deck breaking in the top 8, or even get on the bubble, like maybe even get like 10th or 9th place in the tournament, just barely missing out on top 8 on a bubble. But I would expect to maybe see Mewtwo make a comeback. That is my meta predictions for San Diego. It's really hard to predict what can win a tournament, with the meta being, like, kind of not all over the place, but the meta being so diverse right now. It's really hard to say what is going to win a regionals right now. And honestly, you gotta play it safe and say that some type of Lugia deck is gonna win San Diego. It could be a new deck, like a new way to play Lugia we haven't seen. I know Lugia's starting to play stuff like the Snorlax right now. So we'll have to see, man. I'm excited to see where it goes with San Diego, and we might even see a very unique way to play Lugia win San Diego. It's got to be safe. We got to play it safe and say Lugia's probably going to win San Diego. But it could be a brand new way to play Lugia we haven't seen before, or it'll just be a different, like a normal take on Lugia with just maybe a couple spicy cards like the Amazing Rare Raikou, like what Connor used to win Arlington. And we'll have to see where Lost Box does. But those are my meta predictions for San Diego Regionals. Let me know in the comments below what you are thinking for San Diego. And if you're going to San Diego, hope you have a good time and all that good stuff. I will be attending Orlando Regionals and Knoxville, so if y'all are going to any of those regionals, I will be attending those. So we'll have to see what happens in San Diego, because it might dictate what will do well in Orlando. Even though we got Crown Zenith coming out, I still think that the meta is not going to be that different, maybe apart from like Radiant E-Turn or something. But I'm definitely interested to see what happens to San Diego, because it will dictate what does well in Orlando and what to play to Orlando, because I am going to Orlando. So hope y'all enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and all that good stuff. Sub to the second channel here if you haven't already and all that good stuff. I'll catch you on another video. Bye-bye.